College football season is here in Los Angeles. I'm Ryan Kartje, LA Times USC beat writer, joined today by our UCLA writer Ben Bolch and esteemed columnist Dylan Hernández, esteemed in someone's mind at least. Very interesting weekend for both of our local college teams. I think we should start with Ben, who had a very different weekend than I had in Vegas. Ben, just give us a rundown of what happened with UCLA and its debut.
Yeah, it was a pretty awful start for the Deshaun Foster era. I mean, they did win the game, and we can say this is all his first game jitters and getting a new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, new coach, but they just looked awful. I mean, at halftime they were down 10-0, and we were all talking about 0-12 in the press box. We were talking about, is this going to be the next Tyrone Willingham 0-12 season? Because honestly, if you can't beat Hawaii, who in the Big Ten are you going to beat? And then, even Fresno State at that point. But to UCLA's credit, they did rally. Ethan Garbers, who was horrible in the first half, did not look at all like expected. I mean, Plashke and I were touting him for the Heisman in our pre-season
Oh
Zoom, as
boy.
some of you will remember. Yeah, that's out the window now. Two interceptions in the first half, trying to throw out of his own end zone, which was a bad idea, and threw an interception. But the big question is that just first game stuff, or is that a bad sign of things to come? And that's the question that needs to be answered. And UCLA does have a bye week here to kind of fix some of this stuff. But the question is, how much of it's fixable?
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, from the outside looking in here, did anybody like expect anything like different? I mean, this guy, right, Foster. I mean, I just think he got put in a bad position. And to me, when I'm looking at this thing, I look at the athletic director, you know, the look at me athletic director, right? I mean, this guy should probably be spending like less time, getting in there like what is it, Jordan Brand commercials and actually do his job. I mean, this is just I don't know. To me, this felt like an unserious hire, to be honest, right? And given the situation, I'm actually kind of the mindset that like, look, they did pull it off, right? Given everything he had, inexperience, everything kind of going against him, it was a good thing that he pulled this off. But to me, the larger picture is kind of what does this say about like the state of like the athletic department there right now, where
Well,
they kind of entrusted the program to again a completely inexperienced coach.
I think to your point, Deshaun Foster did surround himself with a very veteran staff. I think they have a combined 47 years of NFL coaching experience. So I think that was a nod to Deshaun's inexperience and the fact that he's taking on more of kind of like a CEO role and letting the coaches coach, his assistants do most of the coaching. But man, Eric Bieniemy's offense, I mean, they generated 24 rushing yards on 13 carries, taking away Ethan Garber's runs, and that's just not going to get it done. So the offense was a mess. The defense actually was pretty good, especially in the second half. They only gave up 3 points and 100 yards. So I give Kaika Malloy, I give him a B or a B plus for that. But yeah, I think to your point, it just looked like a mess. It looked disorganized. They're playing Hawaii. This is a team that they were 2 touchdown favorites, but honestly, you need to win this game comfortably to have any kind of hopes of doing what you want to do this season.
Was it just they were pretty conservative too offensively, weren't they?
Well, not necessarily. In the first half, they were trying to do a lot of deep throws. And that was one of the criticisms, was that Ethan Garbers was locked onto one guy for slow developing plays that they could not capitalize on. They did not run the ball much, didn't do much, short stuff till later in the game. And that's when they started moving the ball. So I think they opened up, thinking that they were going to throw a bunch of, mid to long passes and kind of blow the game open early, but that blew up in their face.
It was a bleak debut, I think we can all agree, for UCLA, even if they came away with the win. But for USC, a totally different story in Las Vegas. Uh, all the questions facing this team, I won't say that they were answered, but we got a lot of answers in this win over LSU, 27-20, USC. Dylan, we were both there together. What was your first impression watching this USC team?
Like, oh my God, they stopped somebody, right? I mean, they can tackle. I mean, I know it sounds just kind of so fundamental, but like after having seen, right, for just so long, these very like porous defenses that frankly like never really gave them a chance to be good, right? And again, I don't, look, it's one game, this is college, right? A lot of roster turnover for like every team. We don't know, right? I mean, for all we know, LSU is terrible. That said, just kind of looking at this, you feel like there's like they have a chance here, right? And again, I do think also, Miller Moss, okay, he can play quarterback at this level and be a good quarterback. So I think all in all, a good start here. And again, and Ben, you covered Danton Lynn. I mean, seems like this guy, right? I mean, if he doesn't coach like another game, he'll go down as one of the greatest defensive masterminds in history for having turned around the defenses of two programs, frankly, that have historically had trouble again, kind of doing the basic stuff.
Yeah, all I can say is Trojan fans will not be seeing D'Anton long on the sideline. This guy's going to get promoted back to the NFL, and I predict he'll be an NFL head coach within 5 years. I think he's that good. He's that smart. He's that organized. He's that dynamic, and he's just on his way up, and USC should capitalize on every moment they have him.
The difference was especially stunning in the defensive front, and especially along the defensive line. This was a group that, was pretty thin on depth. Didn't really have any, game-breaking players. The one that we thought they did have, Bear Alexander, only played in a part-time role in this game. But still, the run defense was able to hold LSU to 117 yards on the ground. And that was after LSU had sort of made a show out of saying, well, we're going to run the ball. We're going to get into a fist fight with USC. I was really impressed, especially in that regard. I mean, four of those runs accounted for more than half of those yards anyway. So the rest of the 22 carries were only, 2-something yards per carry. If USC can do that the rest of the season in the Big Ten, where there are going to be a lot of other teams trying to run the ball down their throats, like you said, Dylan, I think they have a great shot to at least be in it, be in the conversation for the college football playoff. And then you talk about the performance that Miller Moss had, and he also really impressed me. I mean, it was easy to sort of write off the Holiday Bowl as this was one game, a meaningless bowl game against some backups on Louisville, a team that, didn't make it to the ACC championship, so was sort of disappointed by that result. But Miller Moss, quieted those critics almost immediately. And I think what impressed me the most about him was just the fearlessness to stand in the pocket, to really get rid of the ball as quickly as possible, and to throw downfield into situations that, at first I'm watching thinking, oh boy, that's going to get picked off. And one-handed catch by Kyron Hudson between three LSU defenders. So the accuracy Miller Moss really put on display, and the poise, despite being someone who only had one career start, really impressed me. And I am personally reevaluating Miller Moss's ceiling for the rest of this season.
I do want to jump in and put a sad reminder for UCLA fans about being in a similar situation only 3 years ago. Remember when they beat LSU at the Rose Bowl? They did the same get the gat trolling video in the locker room. Everybody was saying, CFP, here we come. Chip Kelly era is finally taking off. And where did that season end? It ended in the Holiday Bowl. So, just as UCLA's season is not over, we have to be careful not to anoint USC automatically making the college football playoff.
I'm glad you brought that up.
These fans have been so mad for so long. Let them have a couple of weeks before they go to Michigan to lose.
That's actually a great point, Ben, in that I wonder where both of these teams sit on the week one overreaction index. How good do we think USC is relative to how well their first week went versus how bad do we think UCLA is versus how poorly it went in Hawaii?
Yeah, I will say the one thing that really has got to concern UCLA fans is that run game and the offensive line. Now, the offensive line, by the end of the game, was missing both of its starting tackles. Garrett DeGiorgio did not play because of a shoulder injury, and then Ruben Uniji left in the third quarter with another injury. So, you got to take that into account. But, man, with Deshaun Foster, who was the running backs coach, and that was the best position under Chip Kelly for 6 years, and then to come out and have that kind of performance with, some of the same guys, TJ Hart and Keegan Jones, is really, really concerning. And if they can't get that fixed, man, it's going to be a long season in Westwood.
And just kind of going back to SC, what I did kind of find it's kind of impressive, right? You can kind of sense it, right, when a culture kind of changes, And I do think again, it's kind of started on that defensive side of the football, right? And kind of it seems like they've managed to do, what like the Chargers are trying to do, right? We want to be more physical, we want to be tougher, and really kind of in that third quarter after LSU took the lead, they forced LSU to punt on back-to-back possessions. And I do think that kind of right that kind of like flows into the offense eventually, helps them gut it through because when I kind of think back to right the games that they won, the close games, right, where Caleb Williams kind of did something. It felt like it was like magic, basically, right, where you had this one guy who was just so much better than everybody else, and he just kind of pulled a rabbit out of his hat. Whereas like this kind of felt like a process, throughout the game where, kind of the toughness and the aggression and everything just kind of, inevitably kind of led to this win. I do think though, right, had they lost this game though, right, and it was a close game, right, what are we saying at this point, do you think, about Lincoln Riley, right? I mean, we saw obviously kind of the mismanagement, at the end of the first half, right early in the fourth quarter, he blew those 2 timeouts very quickly. How much is this story different because of the fact that they won?
I think it's totally different. Although I do think the defense's progress, I think, would have been evident regardless. But as we look ahead at the rest of the season and sort of bring it back to the overreaction index, I think the trajectory of the season is now completely different for USC. Now we're looking at the Michigan game, a team that didn't look good and didn't look like they had a quarterback at all this past week. That's suddenly a winnable game, and one that could completely turn the tides of the season, turning this team into, potentially a college football playoff contender, not just someone who can sneak in. So a lot will be decided there in a couple weeks in Ann Arbor. Until then, I know it's a little quieter around these front. Ben, you have a bye. USC has a home opener against Utah State. Still a lot to be decided in this college football season. But Ben, Dylan, thanks for joining us. You can catch us hopefully every week talking more college football.